with your host, Jaden Miller.
Good day and welcome to Think About It with Jaden Miller. I am your host, Jaden Miller, and we're going to talk about a topic that's been in the news lately that's somewhat controversial. And my intention is to not take a side, but to share with you both sides of it so that you can think about it and make an informed decision or maybe add on to your own current beliefs, and maybe even think about it from the other side's perspective. But before I begin, please like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and like, comment, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. I am on all of your favorite podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Google Podcast, Castbox, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and more. So please support my mission to educate, to inform, and follow on any of those podcast platforms. All right, so in the news lately has been this issue of a leak from the United States Supreme Court. And this leak appears to show that the court is ready to overturn Roe versus Wade. That is the ruling that guarantees federal constitutional protections of abortion rights. All right. And so just to give you a little background of what happened, there was a draft Supreme Court opinion, apparently by conservative Justice Samuel Alito, that was leaked to a news agency called Politico for a story published last Monday. It appears to show that the court is prepared to rule in favor of Mississippi in a case over whether the state can outlaw nearly all abortions at and after 15 weeks of gestation, which is a direct challenge to the guarantee of abortion rights as determined in the Supreme Court decision Roe versus Wade. All right. The 98-page document, which includes 118 footnotes and a 31-page appendix on historical state abortion laws, was published in full. There was a quote there that says Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. It says its reasoning was exceptionally weak and the decision has had damaging consequences. Also in that document that was released, it says Roe versus Wade must be overruled, and goes on to say that it is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. And of course, the people's elected representatives would be the states. And that is what that is referring to. All right. So, that is kind of a synopsis of what's going on there. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Roe versus Wade, let me just give you a quick background on what that's about. Roe versus Wade was a landmark legal decision issued on January 22nd, 1973, in which the United States Supreme Court struck down a Texas statute banning abortion, effectively legalizing the procedure across the United States. The court held that a woman's right to an abortion was implicit in the right to privacy protected by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Prior to Roe versus Wade, abortion had been illegal throughout much of the country since the late 19th century. Since the 1973 ruling, many states have imposed restrictions on abortion rights. All right, so abortion before Roe versus Wade was, until the late 19th century, abortion was legal in the United States before quickening. And quickening is an older term. It's the point at which a woman could first feel movements of the fetus, typically around the 4th month of pregnancy. Some of the early regulations related to abortion were enacted in the 1820s and 1830s and dealt with the sale of dangerous drugs that women used to induce abortions. Despite these regulations and the fact that the drugs sometimes proved fatal to women, they continued to be advertised and sold. In the late 1850s, the newly established American Medical Association began calling for the criminalization of abortion, partly in an effort to eliminate doctors' competitors, such as midwives and homeopaths. Additionally, some nativists, alarmed by the country's growing population of immigrants, were anti-abortion because they feared declining birth rates among white American-born Protestant women. In 1869, the Catholic Church banned abortion at any stage of pregnancy, while in 1873, Congress passed the Comstock Law, which made it illegal to distribute contraceptives and abortion-inducing drugs across through the United States mail. By the 1880s, abortion was outlawed across most of the country. Now, if we move forward into the 1960s, during the women's rights movement, court cases involving contraceptives laid the groundwork for Roe versus Wade. In 1965, the United States Supreme Court struck down a law banning the distribution of birth control to married couples, ruling that the law violated their implied right to privacy under the United States Constitution. And in 1972, the Supreme Court struck down a law prohibiting the distribution of contraceptives to unmarried adults. In 1970, Hawaii became the first state to legalize abortion, although the law only applied to the state's residents. That same year, New York legalized abortion with no residency requirement. And therefore, by the time of Roe versus Wade in 1973, abortion was also legally available in Alaska and Washington. So let's talk about Roe versus Wade. Who is Roe? In 1969, Norma McCorvey, a Texas woman in her early 20s, sought to terminate an unwanted pregnancy. McCorvey, who had grown up in difficult, impoverished circumstances, previously had given birth twice and given up both children for adoption. At the time of McCorvey's pregnancy in 1969, abortion was legal in Texas, but only for the purpose of saving a woman's life. While American women with the financial means could obtain abortions by traveling to other countries where the procedure was safe and legal, or pay a large fee to a U.S. doctor willing to secretly perform an abortion, those options were out of reach to McCorvey and many other women. As a result, some women resorted to illegal, dangerous, back alley abortions or self-induced abortions, okay? And just to give you a glimpse of what that was, and I'm going to attempt to be as vague as possible because I think you can get my message, but quite often, back alley abortions or self-induced abortions were when women would sterilize, for example, a metal a hanger, clothes hanger, and attempt to end the pregnancy by utilizing a hanger which would be inserted inside of them in order to terminate the pregnancy. Very, very dangerous procedure, and this was going on quite often, okay? In the 1950s and 1960s, the estimated number of illegal abortions in the United States ranged from 200,000 to 1.2 million per year, according to the Guttmacher Institute. After trying unsuccessfully to get an illegal abortion, McCorvey was referred to Texas attorneys Linda Coffey and Sarah Weddington, who were interested in challenging anti-abortion laws. So that's where we get the name Jane Roe. Roe versus Wade, Roe. McCorvey became known in court documents as Roe. All right, then there's the Wade part of that. In 1970, the attorneys filed a lawsuit on behalf of McCorvey and all the other women who were or might become pregnant and want to consider all options against Henry Wade, the district attorney of Dallas County, where McCorvey lives. So now we have the name Roe, which was McCorvey, and Wade, who was the district attorney of Dallas County, where McCorvey lived. Wade was earlier in 1964 in the national spotlight when he prosecuted Jack Ruby, who killed Lee Harvey Oswald, the alleged assassin of President John Kennedy. All right. So, the Supreme Court ruling. In June 1970, a Texas district court ruled that the state's abortion ban was illegal because it violated a constitutional right to privacy. Afterward, Wade declared he'd continue to prosecute doctors who performed abortions. The case eventually was appealed to the United States Supreme Court. Meanwhile, McCovey gave birth and put the child up for adoption. On January 22, 1973, the Supreme Court, in a 7-2 decision, struck down the Texas law banning abortion, effectively legalizing the procedure nationwide. In a majority opinion written by Justice Harry Blackmun, the court declared that a woman's right to an abortion was implicit in the right to privacy protected by the 14th Amendment. The court divided pregnancy into 3 trimesters and declared that the choice to end a pregnancy in the first trimester was solely up to the woman. In the second trimester, the government could regulate abortion, although not ban it, in order to protect the mother's health. In the third trimester, the state could prohibit abortion to protect a fetus that could survive on its own outside the womb, except when a woman's health was in danger. All right. So now you've got sort of a background on what has happened here. All right. So before I go on in this discussion, Norma McCorvey, who was Roe, maintained a low profile following the court's decision. But in the 1980s, she was active in the abortion rights movement. Since Roe versus Wade, many states have imposed restrictions that weaken abortion rights, and Americans remain divided over support for a woman's right to choose an abortion. All right. In 1992, litigation against Pennsylvania's Abortion Control Act reached the Supreme Court in a case called Planned Parenthood of Southeastern Pennsylvania versus Casey. The court upheld the central ruling in Roe versus Wade, but allowed states to pass more abortion restrictions as long as they did not pose an undue burden. And then in May 2022, which is where we are now, the nation's highest court agreed to hear Dobbs versus Jackson, Women's Health Organization, regarding the constitutionality of a Mississippi law banning most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. This case presents a direct challenge to Roe versus Wade, which is that case which we discussed at the very beginning, in that this leak from the Supreme Court, which seems to overturn Roe versus Wade, is causing quite a bit of consternation throughout the country. All right. As we discussed this leak, some people have said that it is stunning and unprecedented. And there are a lot of theories that are going out about the possible source of the leak. You know, some say it's from a clerk from a liberal justice hoping to raise public pressure on the court before it publishes its decision to a conservative who wants to soften the impact of the decision when it comes. In other words, nobody knows. So you have, you know, all of these theories. Some say a clerk for a liberal justice, you know, disseminated it to raise public pressure. And then there are some that a conservative clerk, you know, disseminated it so that it softens the impact of the decision. So now, as this, you know, issue now is in the public atmosphere, you know, there's quite a bit that's being said about it, you know. So now you have Democrats, especially those in the United States Senate, who are questioning, you know, whether or not those Supreme Court justices that are now on the court and seem to be supporting overturning Wade, whether they were truthful during their confirmation hearings. You know, you have Justice Clarence Thomas, you know, back in 1992, you know, stating his thoughts about Roe versus Wade, and that, you know, he himself, and, you know, then there's a few other justices, you know, that have mentioned that, well, Roe versus Wade is established precedent, you know, that they don't believe that overturning precedents is the proper thing for the court to do. But now they're sounding hypocritical in that now it seems, based upon this leak, that they do support overturning Roe versus Wade, which has been established precedent for almost 50 years now. All right. So quite a bit going on this week as it relates to this specific case. And so what I want to do is just talk to you a little bit about some of the pros and cons about abortion. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, my opinion here does not matter. This is called Think About It with Jaden Miller. So I want you to think about it. You know, there are a number of pros and cons, and I just want to, for us to think about those and form our own opinions, based on facts, based on information, based on our own personal experiences, based maybe on our own religious views or what have you, and really kind of think about, these different arguments. So I'll just do a few of them and just give you an opportunity to think about them. And, feel free to share your thoughts with me. You can certainly share and comment on my YouTube channel. You can like and comment on any of my or any of your favorite Google Podcast platforms. All right. So here's one. Here's a pro, for abortion. All right. The United States Supreme Court has declared abortion to be a fundamental right guaranteed by the United States Constitution. So, as I've already mentioned, the landmark abortion case, Roe versus Wade, decided in 1973 in favor of abortion rights, and it remains the law of the land. The 7-2 decision stated that the Constitution gives a guarantee of certain areas or zones of privacy, and that this right of privacy is broad enough to encompass a woman's decision whether or not to terminate her pregnancy. All right. That's a pro. Think about that for a woman. For a minute, does a woman have the right of privacy as it relates to whether or not to terminate her pregnancy? Does she solely have that right? All right. So now many arguments are that, this decision was a long time coming, because if we look at the history of this nation, what were women's rights? Very minimal, right? I mean, women for a long time in this country did not have the right to own land. Women did not have the certain rights equal to that of men, okay? Whether it be filing lawsuits, whether it be having bank accounts, it wasn't until the early 1970s that a woman could have a credit card in her own name, okay? And let alone not until 1920, the right to vote. Okay. And I've said this very often in some of my previous podcasts that, even after the Civil War in 1865, okay, black former male slaves had the right to vote before women did in this country. All right. So some women felt that this case solidified that women are equal, but yet in this area that they have a right to their privacy and the decision to make about their own bodies. All right. So that's a pro. Here's a con against abortion. All right. And that is simply that abortion is murder. The killing of an innocent human being is wrong, even if that human being has yet to be born. Unborn babies are considered human beings by the United States government. All right. The Federal Unborn Victims of Violence Act, which was enacted to protect unborn children from assault and murder, states that under federal law, anybody intentionally killing or attempting to kill an unborn child should be punished for intentionally killing or attempting to kill a human being. The act also states that an unborn child is a member of the species Homo sapiens. At least 38 states have passed similar fetal homicide laws. All right. So there on the pro-life side is the belief that abortion is murder. All right. So I want you to think about that. Is abortion murder? Is an unborn child a viable human being? All right. Think about this for a second, that when does your birth date start? Does it start at the time of conception? Because, of course, that would be very, very difficult to determine. Or does your birth start when you are actually physically born? All right. Are you a viable human being prior to that? Because if so, then why isn't your birth date prior to when you're actually born? Okay, just something to think about. All right. Here's another pro. Reproductive choice empowers women by giving them control over their own bodies. All right. As I just mentioned a few minutes ago, the choice over when and whether to have children is central to a woman's independence and ability to determine her future. All right. Former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor wrote in the 1992 decision in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, and I'll quote, "The ability of women to participate equally in the economic and social life of the nation has been facilitated by their ability to control their reproductive lives." Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote in her dissenting opinion in Gonzalez versus Carhart in 2007 that undue restrictions on abortion infringe upon a woman's autonomy to determine her life's course and thus to enjoy equal citizenship stature. All right. CNN's senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin stated that Roe versus Wade was a landmark of what is, in the truest sense, women's liberation. All right. So I want you to think about this for a moment. Abortion rights, giving women control over their own body. Should a woman have control over her own body, specifically and especially when it comes to having children? Okay. The question then is, what right does a man have? Because biologically speaking, in most instances, when the two, men and women, come together for the purpose of having a child, it is not a singular event. All right. There are two people involved, right? So therefore, there's an argument that can be made. Well, it is the man that is delivering a part of his body in order to help the woman to form, another human being. All right. So does he have any rights as well? All right. And that could be the argument on the pro-life side. What rights does a man have? Okay. Does he have any? Does this really empower women by allowing them, if allowing is the right word, to have control over their own bodies? But doesn't she already have that control? Is the question I'm sure that those on the pro-life side would ask. So we have two former members of the Supreme Court who are females that were supportive of abortion rights and over the rights that women should have, the independence and the ability to determine their own futures. And so on the pro-abortion side, that is central to their argument, that reproductive choice empowers women by giving them control over their own bodies. And again, it goes back historically that women have not had the type of empowerment, the type of control over their lives, let alone their bodies. And so this empowers them. That's the argument from the pro-abortion side. On the other side, just to, give them that equal say, the pro-life people say that life begins at conception. So unborn babies are human beings with a right to life. Upon fertilization, a human individual is created with a unique genetic identity that remains unchanged throughout his or her life. This individual has a fundamental right to life, which must be protected. All right. In the Holy Quran, for those that are Muslims, but even if you're not a Muslim, it still says in the Holy Quran that excuse me, the life begins when a clot is formed. Okay. At the very inception, okay, when the male sperm and the female egg meet and they create that human being. That clot that is formed is the beginning of life, according to the Holy Quran, in its scientific way of getting that point across. All right. And then going into that a little bit more, on the pro-abortion side, it says personhood begins after a fetus becomes viable, meaning able to survive outside the womb or after birth, not at conception. Okay, so the abortion rights activists say that embryos and fetuses are not independent, self-determining beings, and abortion is determination of a pregnancy, not a baby. A person's age, and I've already made this point, a person's age is calculated from birth date, not conception, and fetuses are not counted in the United States Census. The majority opinion in Roe v. Wade states that the word person is used in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, that it does not include the unborn. All right, that is a point made by the pro-abortion rights activists. On the other side, however, the pro-life folks say that fetuses feel pain during the abortion procedure. And then there are a number of physicians or professors, doctors, that explain this. Maureen Condict, a PhD associate professor of neurobiology and anatomy and adjunct associate professor of pediatrics at the University of Utah School of Medicine, explains that the most primitive response to pain, the spinal reflex, is developed by 8 weeks gestation, and adds that there is universal agreement that pain is detected by the fetus in the first trimester. All right. Bernard Nathanson, MD, the late abortion doctor who renounced his earlier work and became a pro-life activist, stated that when an abortion is performed on a 12-week-old fetus, we see in an ultrasound image the child's mouth open in a silent scream. This is the silent scream of a child threatened imminently with extinction. Now that's deep. That's pretty deep. All right. Here's another one. The pro-abortion rights activists say that in contrast to what I just said for the abortion, the pro-life people, that fetuses are incapable of feeling pain when most abortions, are performed. According to a review by Britain's Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, most neuroscientists believe that the cortex is necessary for pain perception. The cortex does not become functional until at least the 26th week of a fetus's development, long after most abortions are performed. The finding was endorsed by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which states that there is no legitimate scientific information that supports the statement that a fetus experiences pain. A University of California at San Francisco study said fetuses probably can't feel pain until the 29th or 30th week of gestation. Abortions that late into a pregnancy are extremely rare and are often restricted by state laws. According to Stuart Derbyshire, a PhD senior lecturer at the University of Birmingham in the UK, he says that fetuses cannot be held to experience pain. Not only has the biological development not yet occurred to support pain experience, but the environment after birth, so necessary to the development of pain experience, is also yet to occur. The flinching and other reactions seen in fetuses when they detect pain stimuli are mere reflexes, not an indication that the fetus is perceived or feeling anything. All right. That seems to rebut the pro-life explanation that fetuses do feel pain. What do you think? Think about that for a moment, okay? You have a group of scientists, doctors that say that, wow, there is universal agreement that pain is detected by the fetus in the first semester, but then you have the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the majority of them, or at least in a finding they endorsed, and then Britain's College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists that say that that's not so. That there is no legitimate scientific information that supports the statement that a fetus experiences pain. All right. So you have these diametrically opposite opinions from those that are in the medical field. Who are we to believe? Think about that for a moment. Here's another abortion rights activist. Pro-life. Here's another pro-life argument. Abortion is the killing of a human being which defies the word of God. Let's delve into this one. The Bible does not draw a distinction between fetuses and babies. The Greek word brephos is used in the Bible to refer to both an unborn child and an infant. By the time a baby is conceived, he or she is recognized by God, as demonstrated in Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5. It says, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and therefore and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee." The sixth commandment of the Bible's Old Testament says that thou shalt not kill. That's found in Exodus chapter 20 verse 13, and that it applies to all human beings, including unborn babies. In the Hindu religion, the holy text Kashataki Upanishad states that abortion is an equivalent misdeed to killing one's own parents. The BBC states that traditional Buddhism rejects abortion because it involves the deliberate destroying of a life. So on the religious side, we know that what it says in the Bible, and we now know that in the Hindu religion and the traditional Buddhism, that abortion, according to those religions, is not right. Okay. How does that impact your decision? Of course, the Catholic Church, disavows abortion, feels that it is not right. But on the other hand, the United Methodist Church supports abortion. Okay. So again, we have these diametrically opposed views, even in religion or amongst religious, different denominations. All right. Here's another argument from the abortion rights activists. It says that access to legal, professionally performed abortion reduces maternal injury and death caused by unsafe, illegal abortions. All right. According to Daniel Michel, MD, chair of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the Keck School of Medicine at the University of Southern California, he says that before abortion was legalized, women would frequently try to induce abortions by using, as I've already mentioned, coat hangers, knitting needles, or radiator flush, or by going to unsafe back alley abortionists. In 1972, there were 39 maternal deaths from illegal abortions. By 1976, after Roe versus Wade had legalized abortion nationwide, this number dropped to 2. The World Health Organization estimated that unsafe abortions cause 68,000 maternal deaths worldwide each year. Many of those in developing countries where safe and legal abortion services are difficult to access. All right, let's explore that for a moment. So after Roe, now those women that decide that they want to have abortions, okay, can do so in medical environments and clean environments. But I want you to think about this for a moment. All right. Women that are pregnant and do not want to have their babies are going to find a way to have an abortion. Okay, that is just a fact. All right. So whether it's legalized or not, if a woman wants to terminate her pregnancy, she will find a way to do so. Okay. And the point here is that do we want women to, in their homes where it's not sanitary, or in some back alley, place, resort to using a coat hanger? Think about that for a moment. This is called Think About It with Jaden Miller. Think about it. Using a coat hanger to terminate her pregnancy. Using a knitting needle or radiator flush. Okay, so the argument then can be made, if women are going to do this, all right, regardless of whether it is legal or not, shouldn't it be performed where it's safe? Where their lives, okay, are looked after, as opposed to in some unsafe environment. All right, so think about that for a moment. All right, here's another opinion from pro-life folks. And it says that the decision in Roe versus Wade was wrong and should be overturned. And this is their reasoning. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, who has now passed on, he's dead, but he stated that while he was alive, that the right to privacy defended in Roe versus Wade is utterly idiotic and should not be considered binding precedent. So here we have a former, of course, deceased Supreme Court Justice that felt that it should not be binding precedent. Okay, he goes on to say that there is no right to privacy in the United States Constitution. Now, some people would say that Antonin Scalia was pretty extreme in many of his views, especially when it came to the Constitution. So he may not be seen as, someone that, or at least in his opinion, that it was one worth, considering. However, he did say this, that, Roe versus Wade was not or should not be considered binding precedent. And if he were alive today, he certainly would be amongst those seeking to overturn Roe versus Wade. All right. Justice William H. Rehnquist, who also retired from the court, stated that an abortion is not private in the ordinary usage of that word, nor is the privacy that the court finds here, meaning in that decision, Roe versus Wade, even a distant relative of the freedom from searches and seizures protected by the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. He goes on to say that furthermore, the 14th Amendment bars states from depriving any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The Supreme Court overreached in Roe versus Wade, according to William H. Rehnquist, when it excluded unborn children from the class of persons. All right. So you have this opposition on the Supreme Court from conservative justices and more liberal justices. But understand that Sandra Day O'Connor was a conservative, and she mainly was on the conservative side of the court, but yet she was a supporter of abortion rights for a woman. All right. The abortion or the pro-life people feel that abortions cause psychological damage. They base this on some research around the world, which says, and one is from a Scandinavian Journal of Public Health, that found that young adult women who undergo abortion may be at increased risk for subsequent depression. All right. There was another study published that found that women who underwent an abortion had significantly higher anxiety scores on the hospital anxiety and depression scale up to 5 years after the pregnancy termination. All right. A peer-reviewed study published by the Southern Medical Journal of more than 173,000 American women found that women who aborted were 154% more likely to commit suicide than women who carried to term. All right. And then a Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology study of men whose partners had abortion found that 51.6% of the men reported regret, 45.2% felt sadness, and 25.8% experienced depression, okay, when their partner resorted to having an abortion. Do men have any rights? Do men have any say when it comes to a woman's right to choose in this area? Should they? So if we look at this from the standpoint of when a child is born, does a man have any rights to his child? Or does he only have rights to provide for the child financially? Okay. Does a man have a right to emotionally and, provide for their children's, their welfare, and not just financial, but, their upbringing and all of those things, or is that only, when a child is viable, a child is born, okay? So prior to that, does the man have any say in terms of, how a woman is taking care of herself, how she's feeding herself, how she's, making sure that she's getting proper health care during her pregnancy? Does a man have any say in any of that? Okay. Should he have a say? Is this really a woman's right to choose issue? Is this really an issue of, looking back at history and saying that women have, historically not been able to have control over their lives and over their bodies? Is it an issue? Okay, is that something that should be considered in this whole debate on abortion? All right. I just mentioned to you, that abortion or pro-rights activists, pro-life people feel that abortion causes psychological damage. But then, on the abortion rights side, it says that women who receive abortions are less likely to suffer mental health problems than women denied abortion. So we have all of these different studies. Let me share it with you. It says a peer-reviewed study comparing the mental health of women who received abortions to women denied abortions found that women who were denied abortions felt more regret and anger and less relief and happiness than women who had abortions. The same study also found that 95% of women who received abortions felt it was the right decision a week after the procedure. Studies by the American Psychological Association, the Academy of Medical Rural Colleges, and researchers at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health all concluded that purported links between abortion and mental health problems are unfounded. So here again, we have these diametrically opposed views. Okay, we have these medical studies, one saying that, it does cause depression. Okay, it does have an impact on a woman's psychological health. Okay, on the pro-life side, but on the abortion rights side, they're saying no, that women are less likely to suffer mental health problems. Which one is it? Think about it with Jaden Miller. Which one is it? We have studies on one side, studies on another side. How are we ever going to know which one is right? So then it really comes down to our own personal beliefs. All right. On the pro-life side, they conclude that women should not be able to use abortion as a form of contraception. They say that it is immoral to kill an unborn child for convenience. The Guttmacher Institute reported that 45% of all women having abortions every year have had at least one previous abortion, while 8.6% of abortions reported to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention were undergone by women who had 3 or more previous abortions. This suggests, according to pro-life activists, that many women are using abortion as a contraceptive method. All right. What do you think about that? On the abortion rights side, they conclude or contend that women who are denied abortions are more likely to become unemployed, to be on public welfare, to be below the poverty line, and to become victims of domestic violence. A University of California at San Francisco study found that women who were turned away from abortion clinics because they had passed the gestational limit imposed by the clinic were 3 times more likely to be below the poverty level 2 years later than women who were able to obtain abortions. 76% of the turnaways ended up on unemployment benefits compared with 44% of the women who had abortions. The same study found that women unable to obtain abortions were more likely to stay in a relationship with an abusive partner than women who had an abortion, and were more than twice as likely to become victims of domestic violence. What do you think about that? Women who are denied abortions are more likely to become unemployed, to be on public welfare, to be below the poverty line. Then my question is, weren't they already mostly unemployed? Weren't they mostly already on public welfare? Weren't they mostly below the poverty line even before they wanted to have an abortion? Just the thought. Think about it with Jaden Miller. On the pro-life side, their argument is that if women become pregnant, they should accept the responsibility that comes with producing a child. The pro-life folks say that people need to take responsibility for their actions and accept the consequences. Having sexual intercourse, even when contraceptive methods are used, carries with it the risk of a pregnancy. The unborn baby should not be punished for a mistake made by adults. If women are unprepared to care for their children, they should at least put them up for adoption. And so here the pro-life folks say that carry that baby full term, because that was your decision. That is your responsibility. You decided to have sex, and knowing that even though you might be using contraceptive methods, there still is the risk of pregnancy. So what they're saying is that, you wanted to have a good time, okay? But see, you don't want to be responsible for what happens after the good time, okay? So it was really great during, okay? But you don't want to be responsible for the after effects, okay? So then you need to step up and take responsibility. What do you think? Should women, so we talk about women's rights, okay? We talk about women having the right, to, have an abortion, that this issue is a right to privacy, okay? Yeah, but what about the issue of responsibility? So is it all about, I made a bad decision and I can terminate, okay? But what about, no, you have a responsibility and you need to follow through on what you started? Is that an issue that should be discussed? Is that an issue that should be taken into consideration? Should this be part of this whole abortion rights or, pro-life argument? Should it be? The pro-life people also say that abortion promotes a culture in which human life is disposable. Okay? The legalization of abortion sends a message that human life has little value. Pope Francis condemned the throwaway culture in January 2014, stating that what is thrown away is not only food and dispensable objects, but often human beings themselves, who are discarded as unnecessary. All right? Well, I want you to think about this for a minute. Do conservatives really care about unborn babies? They say abortion is murder, all right? But if you look at conservatives and pro-life folks, when it comes to the death penalty, they're not pro-life. So if someone kills someone, okay, at least on the liberal side mostly, there is this will to allow them to live out their lives in prison. But on the pro-life side, and I mean, look at the words pro-life, okay? Is it only pro-life for unborn babies? What about someone that is born? Okay, now I want you to think about this because I think I'm being fair here. So you want an unwanted baby not to be aborted, but to be born. Okay, let's say that they continue to come up in these disadvantaged, these situations where they're disadvantaged, where, they may be likely to be on public welfare, to be below the poverty line. Maybe parents were victims of domestic violence. Now they grow up in this, and now this environment leads them to a life of crime in which it leads them to commit a murder. Okay, well, according to pro-life folks, well, if the death penalty is an option, then the death penalty should be carried out. So how does that make you pro-life? You're pro-life on one end of their lives, but pro-death on the other end of their lives. Help me to understand that part. Okay? Now, again, what I'm doing here is I'm playing devil's advocate. All right? So I want you to look at both sides of this issue as you determine for yourselves where you fall under this. All right. That's my purpose here today. Not to share with you my opinion, because my opinion does not matter. All right. What does matter is what yours is. All right. I've already formed my opinion. Okay. A long time ago. And like society, it fluctuates. It goes back and forth depending. Okay. So for a long time, I was a proponent of the death penalty. And then when I saw how the death penalty proportionally impacted only certain segments of society, that made me pull back some and say, well, you know what? See, if we're not going to enact it fairly, then we should not do it at all. So I just want you to think about those things. Sometimes your opinions can fluctuate. All right. Just a couple of more and I'll be done. Pros and cons. All right. The pro-life folks say that allowing abortion conflicts with the unalienable right to life recognized by the founding fathers of the United States. The Declaration of Independence states that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Abortion takes away from the unborn the unalienable right to life that the founding fathers intended for all human beings. Now, you know what? See, if the pro-life people are going to use that argument, that is a horrible argument to use. Let me tell you why. First of all, when Thomas Jefferson stated that, all men are created equal, remember there was slavery in this country. So no, all men were not created equal. According to them, many of them, the founding fathers, all men were all white men. We were not created equal because black male slaves were certainly underfoot. Okay, so let's not do that. American Indians in this country were considered savages. Okay, so they did not fit into this argument of all men are created equal. So that's a horrible argument to use if you're going to say that, abortion takes away from the unborn the unalienable right to life that the founding fathers intended for all human beings, because the founding fathers did not intend that for all human beings. They intended that only for white males. That's a fact that is indisputable. Okay, so that is not a good argument. Okay, but there is a good argument on the pro-life side that I want to end with today and discuss with you. And that is this. Okay, that abortion disproportionately affects African American babies. In the United States, black women are 3.3 times as likely as white women to have abortions. According to the Guttmacher Institute in New York City in 2015, more black babies were aborted, 23,720, that had live births. Now, that is an issue that concerns me. Okay. And so I want to end by getting into this last little topic. And that is about a woman that was the leader in the abortion rights movement. And her name is Margaret Sanger. Okay. Margaret Sanger was quite a controversial person in the early 1900s. All right. She was a eugenicist, which meant that she encouraged the sterilization of persons with less desirable qualities and strongly encouraged the reproduction of groups with more desirable qualities. Sangster's disdain for blacks, minority groups, and the diseased and disabled spawned the birth of an abortion corporation that, according to some, profits off the killing of the weakest and most vulnerable. From its conception, Planned Parenthood was built upon the roots of exterminating individuals deemed unfit for the human family. All right, so I just mentioned to you Margaret Sanger. All right. She was born in 1879, and she was an activist, and she sparked both revolution and controversy when she began pushing for legalized access to birth control and founded the Planned Parenthood Federation of America. All right. She remains controversial even after all of these years. She died in 1966. Okay, so many years after her death, more than 50, she still remains controversial. She believed that birth control was a free speech issue. All right. And she, was indicted in 1914 because she tried to disseminate information about contraceptives through the United States mail, which was illegal through something called the Comstock Law. All right. She, amongst several other people, popularized the term birth control. She was definitely a believer in it. She even said, here's a quote by author Madeline Gray, that birth control, they all liked it, as they put that. She goes on to say that they agreed that birth control was the best name for the movement that they had established. All right, meaning Margaret Sanger, Robert Parker, and others. Okay, so they coined this term birth control. All right, so birth control is associated with family limitation. Okay, which is another word that they use. Birth control was associated with abortion. All right. Margaret Sanger opened her first birth control clinic in the United States in 1916. All right. But again, the clinic was closed, because it was alleged that she was violating the Comstock laws. Again, trying to disseminate pamphlets to women on what every girl should know about her reproductive system. All right. She's controversial because of some things that she said. All right. Many well-known intellectuals of her day supported her. For example, people like Theodore Roosevelt and John D. Rockefeller, who actually supported her anonymously but financially. Alexander Graham Bell, Sanger's support for sterilizing the diseased and feeble-minded legitimized the birth control movement by aligning her ideas with those of contemporary intellectuals. All right. Margaret Sanger did not ever hide her eugenics, beliefs. All right. She believed in them all of her life. She said some very controversial things that, again, have caused me concern. So here we go. When it came to African Americans, in a letter to Dr. Clarence Gamble in December 19, 1939, she exposited her vision for the Negro Project, a freshly launched collaboration between the American Birth Control League and Sanger's Birth Control Clinical Research Bureau. The letter echoes the eugenic ideology still visible within the corporate vein of Planned Parenthood to this very day. This is what she says. It seems to me from my experience that while the colored Negroes have great respect for white doctors, they can get closer to their own members and more or less lay their cards on the table, which means their ignorance, superstitions, and doubts. We should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. That causes me some concern, folks. Okay, because Margaret Sanger, who believes in eugenics, okay, and appears to me to believe in the extermination of the Negro population. These are her words. She says we don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. Okay. Now, we can look at that two ways. She can say we don't want it to go out because that's wrong, or we can use her words literally, which says we don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. That's up for debate. I will let you think about that and you decide it. But these are her words. Okay. And those words are concerning to me because it does seem like, okay, she wants to limit to a big degree the amount of Negro babies born. Okay. And here's what goes along with that to back up this assertion. Okay. I accepted, this is Margaret Sanger speaking, I accepted an invitation to talk to the women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan. We all know what the Ku Klux Klan is. If you don't, Google it. In 1926, Sanger spoke at a Ku Klux Klan rally in 1926 in Silver Lake, New Jersey. Following the invitation, Sanger describes her elation after receiving multiple speaking requests from white supremacy groups. She writes on the experience on page 366 of her book and autobiography. This is what she says. I accepted an invitation to talk to the women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan. I saw through the door dim figures parading with banners and illuminated crosses. I was escorted to the platform, was introduced, and began to speak. In the end, through simple illustrations, I believed I had accomplished my purpose. A dozen invitations, to speak to similar groups were proffered. So the key word here is, or words, I believed I had accomplished my purpose. For what reason are you going to speak to the Ku Klux Klan? Okay. Are you going to speak to the Ku Klux Klan because you want to discuss with them birth control, meaning contraceptives? Or are you meeting with the Ku Klux Klan because you want to discuss with them the extermination of the Negro that we just talked about? Okay. Think about it with Jaden Miller. I want you to think about that. And then the last point that I want to make is this is what she says. They are, okay, I'm going to tell you who the they are in just a moment. They are human weeds, reckless breeders, spawning human beings who should never have been born. Okay, this is in Pivot of Civilization, another one of her writings. Okay, she's now referring to immigrants, the poor. Okay, and these immigrants and the poor that she's referring to are black people, Jews, okay, and then immigrants from the lesser liked European countries, as well as people of color from other parts of the world. All right. She says they are human weeds, reckless breeders spawning human beings who should never have been born. She goes on to say that organized charity itself is the symptom of a malignant social disease. Instead of decreasing and aiming to eliminate the stocks of people that are most detrimental to the future of the race and the world, it tends to render them to a menacing degree dominant. She also wanted the sick and the disabled to be exterminated, to be eliminated. Okay. So as you all can see, this abortion issue is tough. Okay. As an African-American man, it's tough for me because when we look at the amount of abortions in this country, all right, especially of black unborn children, that worries me. That concerns me. It concerns me in that, there are so many people that or unborn persons that could have contributed to society. Okay. But on top of that, I look at these different arguments, and I ask myself the question, are conservatives, many of them who associate themselves with white supremacist groups or white groups, and that's not all. And let me be very clear: not all conservatives or not all Republicans associate themselves with white supremacists. They do not. It's just that white supremacists, and these race haters tend to be on the conservative side. Okay. Now that's just a fact. So don't get on my case for telling you facts, okay? But that is the fact, okay? Most of them are on that side. Now, that's not to say there aren't any liberals that are racist, because there are. Trust me, there are. Well, I mean, if we look at it, we could consider Margaret Sanger to be a liberal, okay, in some aspects of it, all right? Because Planned Parenthood, which was her baby, is definitely on the liberal side. It is not on the conservative side. So I don't want you to get it twisted, okay? I understand that there are liberals that can be racist. Trust me, okay? I grew up in Chicago. There's a whole lot of Democrats, okay, that, moved out of neighborhoods when black people moved into them, okay, that considered themselves liberals, that considered themselves Democrats. So trust me, I can determine both, all right? But it's still concerning, which raises the question, on the conservative side, do you really care about unborn black babies? Okay. I mean, do you? Because when we look at it, it doesn't seem like you're concerned about, these babies that grow into black men. Okay. Because when they're harassed and beaten by the police and file lawsuits, and when there's discrimination against black men, we will always wonder where are the conservatives at then, So again, I'm just fleshing out all of these issues because we need to think about all of these, and we need to try to come to some conclusions, okay? Tough issues, tough decision. What is the Supreme Court going to ultimately do? Are they going to overturn Roe versus Wade? Will abortion then be disseminated to the states? And I want to make this clear as well. Just because the federal government or the Supreme Court decides, if they decide that abortion, is not an issue to be decided at the federal level. And I want to make that distinction too, that just because the Supreme Court overturns, if they do this, all they're doing is overturning Roe versus Wade. Okay. But they're not saying that, and they're only overturning it because they're saying that it is not a decision to be made at the federal level. Okay. So that's the issue. It's not about overturning Roe versus Wade and then abortion will be illegal. That's not it at all. Okay. Because abortion was legal in certain areas prior to Roe versus Wade, but it was a state issue. Okay, not a federal issue where the 14th Amendment becomes a part of it, or the 4th Amendment. Okay, so that's the issue. Okay, so if Roe versus Wade is overturned, states still can decide for themselves because it goes to the people's elected representatives. That is the states. So the states will decide. So, for example, Mississippi can say, well, you know what? We are going to outlaw abortion. But Alabama could say, well, we're going to allow abortion. Illinois could say, we are going to allow for abortion. But right next door in Indiana, that state could say there are no abortions. Okay. And so then a woman that wants to have an abortion would have to travel to a state where they allow them. So abortion is not going away. Okay. The only thing that would go away is the decision made at the federal level. Okay. So I want those that are abortion rights activists to, or especially young people, to know that, a woman's right to choose, if you believe that, does not go away. It's just that it's an issue that should not be decided at the federal level. And then those on the pro-life side should understand that, well, state legislatures now get to decide. And as long as you have enough people that are elected into positions that represent your viewpoint, okay, then abortion could be outlawed in your jurisdiction, okay? But still, fundamentally, okay, it is left up to the states to decide if that is the will of the Supreme Court. But ultimately, abortion does not go away. It still will remain, whether it be legal or whether it be done in some back alley fashion, using some knitting needle, using some coat hanger, or other means, that whatever that woman decides to do, okay, it will happen. All right. So if you really think about it, a woman's right to choose still does not go away, regardless of whether you're a pro-life person or an abortion rights activist. If she chooses to do it legally, she will. But if she chooses to do it illegally, she will. All right? That's still her choice. All right. Thank you, guys. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and like, comment, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. Again, I'm on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, Castbox, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and many more. It has been a pleasure discussing this with you. All right. Again, Roe versus Wade, abortion. What are your thoughts? Think about it with Jaden Miller. I look forward to the next topic we discuss on another day. Have a fabulous, fabulous day.
Thank you for listening to Think About It with Jaden Miller. Don't forget to like and subscribe to his YouTube channel, and like and follow on your favorite podcast platform.